Story 1. The Roommate Who Wasn't There. The quiet new apartment. When Hannah moved into her new apartment, she thought she had found a steal, downtown half the rent, and already furnished with everything she needed. The landlord brushed off her curiosity about why it was so cheap. Previous tenant left in a hurry, that's all. Hannah didn't mind. She was just thrilled to live alone for the first time. The first few days were uneventful, except for a constant feeling of being observed when she sat in the living room. She laughed it off. New place jitters, she told herself. But small things started nagging her. Her mug wasn't where she had left it. The bathroom light, which she was certain she'd switched off, would be glowing late at night. On the fourth evening, as she unpacked boxes in her bedroom, she heard a faint cough, deep, throaty, unmistakably human, coming from the hallway. Hannah froze. Holding her breath, she listened, palms damp with sweat. "Hello?" she called, trying to sound confident, though her voice wavered. Silence. She crept to the hallway, but it was empty, the faint smell of cigarette smoke lingering even though she didn't smoke. Her heart thudded. The doors were locked, the windows shut. As she stepped back into her room, she saw something that made her stomach twist. On her pillow lay a single strand of long, dark hair. Hannah had blonde hair. She didn't live alone after all. Night whispers. That night, Hannah barely slept. Every creak of the wood made her hold her breath. She kept her bedroom lamp on, clutching her phone like a weapon. At around 3 a.m., she finally drifted into uneasy sleep, only to wake up with a start. Someone was whispering. Her heart jolted. The whispers were muffled at first, almost like a soft conversation between two people in the next room. The voices didn't sound familiar, low, hurried, and urgent. Slowly, she tiptoed to her door and pressed her ear against it. The whispers hushed instantly, as if they knew she was listening. She backed away quickly, stomach tight with dread. "No, this isn't real," she tried convincing herself. But when she crawled back to bed, she noticed her lamp had been turned off. She hadn't touched it. Forcing herself to breathe, Hannah whispered shakily, "Who's here?" The silence was suffocating, but then, in a voice that wasn't faint at all, it was close, horribly close, like it came from beside her bed. A low whisper answered, "Go to sleep," Hannah screamed, fumbling for her phone's flashlight. The light revealed nothing. Her room was empty, but just before she switched on the overhead light, she caught something in the corner. A crooked shadow, the shape of a man, lingering where no one should be, and then it was gone. Over the next week, Hannah tried escaping the apartment as much as possible. Late-night coffee shops, long walks, crashing at friends' places. But she always had to return eventually. And each time, something new would be off. Her toothbrush wet in the morning, though she hadn't touched it. Shoes rearranged near the door. The bathroom mirror fogged up with what looked like faint finger trails, as though someone had written in the steam. One evening, after returning from work, she found her fridge door wide open. The smell of rotting food filled the air. Her stomach churned, but the detail that made her drop everything was much worse. On the table lay an ashtray full of cigarette butts, still warm. She scrambled to the landlord, voice shaking. "There's someone in my apartment. Someone's been living here." The landlord's face paled as though he'd expected this. In hushed tones he told her, "The girl before you." She said the same. Complained about things moving, whispers. She checked out one morning, left everything behind. Didn't even pack. Never heard from her again. That night, Hannah triple-locked every door and slept with a knife under her pillow. But at around 2 a.m., she woke to the familiar stench of smoke. And then the sound of breathing, not hers. Slow, rattling like someone standing directly above her bed. Her courage cracked. She dared not move. Finally, summoning every bit of strength, she whipped the blanket aside and slashed her knife into the dark. But she only cut through air. The breathing, however, didn't stop. It was right at her ear now. The secret space. By morning, Hannah had reached her breaking point. Desperate, She pulled the apartment apart, searching for hidden cameras, vents, crawl spaces, anything. That's when she noticed something peculiar. The back panel of her bedroom closet looked newer than the rest of the wood, like it had been replaced. With trembling fingers, she pried it open. The panel gave way, revealing a narrow passage. The smell hit her first, damp, sour, suffocating. She forced herself to crawl through with her phone's flashlight. Behind the wall was a hidden room. It was small, the ceiling low, but in it were blankets, canned food, and dozens of cigarette butts scattered in jars. And then she saw them, Polaroid pictures taped to the wall. Her pictures, Hannah sleeping, Hannah brushing her teeth, Hannah sitting in the living room reading a book. Her veins froze as she saw the last one, taken just the night before. She lay in bed, the lamp on, face calm with sleep. But at the corner, looming above her, was a dark figure holding the camera. She staggered backward, dropping her phone. The sound of movement came from the crawl space. Someone was coming back. Her only escape was back through her bedroom. Heart hammering, she scrambled out of the wall, slamming the panel shut just as hands clawed toward her ankles. She screamed and ran for the front door, fumbling with the locks as footsteps thundered against the floor inside the closet. The vanished Hannah burst into the hallway, tears streaking her face, shoving past neighbors as she screamed for help. Police arrived within 10 minutes. With shaking hands, she led them to the closet. But when the officers pried it open, the panel was sealed back into place, as though it had never been touched. They laughed it off as hysteria, though one officer quietly frowned when Hannah insisted. "Ma'am, there's no space behind here. This wall is solid concrete." She felt her heart sink. Had it been a hallucination? But the smell of smoke still clung to her clothes, sharp and undeniable. That night, Hannah stayed at a friend's place. She didn't dare go near the apartment again. Weeks passed. She thought she was safe. And then one morning, her friend found something slid under the front door, a Polaroid. It was Hannah sleeping peacefully on the sofa in her friend's living room. In the corner of the photo, just barely out of focus, was that crooked shadow again. The police never found who lived with Hannah in that apartment. But to this day, she swears she can feel eyes following her whenever she closes her eyes. And somewhere out there, someone has her life captured photo by photo. Story 2. The Voices in the Woods. The camping trip Raj, his younger brother Ali, and 2 close friends decided to escape the city for a weekend camping trip deep in the pine forests of Murray. The plan was simple. Pitch a tent, cook over a fire, and enjoy the pure silence away from traffic and neon lights. The first evening went perfectly. The group laughed, roasted corn, told stories, and watched the stars blink through branches swinging in the night breeze. Somewhere around midnight, as the fire burned low, they noticed something strange. The woods weren't silent anymore. A faint humming started in the distance. At first it sounded like a radio left on very low. A woman singing carried softly through the trees. Ali tilted his head. "Do you guys hear that?" Everyone froze. The sound was clear now, a melody without words, humming that floated just beyond the firelight. Raj forced a laugh. "It's probably some villager nearby. Just ignore it." But he didn't believe that, not really. They had hiked miles away from any settlement. No lights anywhere, only endless dark forest stretching on all sides. The humming grew louder, weaving between trees. It circled the camp. Every hair on Raj's neck stood on end. Then, without warning, the voice stopped. The sudden silence was worse. No crickets, no wind, no rustle of leaves. Just stillness, waiting. And then behind them a woman's voice said clearly, "Are you lost?" They spun toward the sound, flashlights shaking in their trembling hands. The forest was empty. Nothing moved, but the voice was real. Far too real. The stranger at the edge. The group barely slept that night. They kept the lantern burning inside the tent, whispering theories, trying to rationalize what they had heard. None of them succeeded. Morning brought weak courage. Sunlight made things feel less terrifying. though Ali swore he saw footprints around their campsite, bare human prints circling their tent. Raj brushed it off as probably ours, though the prints were larger than any of their feet. By evening, the forest returned to its normal chorus of birds and crickets. The group tried to enjoy another fire, cooking noodles and nervously joking about the weird night. But when the fire began to dim, the humming returned once more. This time it came from the left side of camp. Everyone snapped to attention, ears straining. And then movement. Just beyond the reach of their firelight, a figure stood between the trees. A woman. Her body was too still, arms at her sides, long hair draping over her face. She didn't move toward them, didn't blink, didn't lift her head. She just stood there. Ali whispered hoarsely. "Raj, do something," Raj shouted. "Hello? Who's there? Do you need help?" The woman's head twitched slightly. Then she stepped back into the shadows, swallowed instantly by the darkness. They rushed after her with flashlights but found nothing. The ground was bare of footprints. The forest smelled strangely sour, like rotting water, and the temperature seemed to drop suddenly, frost nipping at their skin. As they turned back toward camp, the humming rose behind them again. But this time it wasn't one voice. It was many. Night of terror. They barricaded themselves inside the tent, zipping the entry tight, their lantern glowing white against the thin fabric. Outside, the voices multiplied, male and female, whispering, mumbling, louder and louder, until it sounded like dozens of people circling them. Ali clutched Raj's arm. I swear someone just dragged their hand across the tent, and he was right. A faint scraping sound moved along the outer canvas, slow and deliberate. Then came a rhythm, fingers dragging upward, downward around the tent's perimeter. Raj tried to grab his phone, but there was no signal. Panic surged in his chest. The voices outside grew sharper, and then they all stopped at once. A single voice, calm and clear, spoke directly against the thin fabric. So close they all jumped. "Why are you in my home?" The lantern flickered violently. The tent quaked as if someone pressed against all sides at once, the fabric stretching inward, fingertips indenting every wall. The group screamed, huddling in the center as the tent seemed about to collapse. Suddenly the zipper began to move, slowly, from the top. Raj lunged forward, yanking at it to close, but the invisible hand pulled back harder, inching its way open. Cold night air seeped inside. Before the gap widened enough to see outside, Ali slashed at it with a pocket knife. The voices exploded all at once, shrill, overlapping, like a crowd shrieking in rage. Then dead silence again. When they peeked outside, they saw only the fire, now extinguished, and the woods, darker than before. But at the very edge of their light, the same still woman stood again. The chase Raj knew they couldn't survive another night. He ordered everyone to grab their things and move now. They stuffed essentials into bags and began hiking through the forest by flashlight, following the trail that seemed endless. Branches cracked behind them. Leaves rustled to their left, then to their right. Every second, footsteps followed, always just out of sight. Ali whimpered, "She's following us. She's making us go the wrong way." And Raj's stomach dropped when he realized he no longer recognized the trail. They had hiked it yesterday without trouble, but now it seemed different. Trees twisted unnaturally close, branching over like warped claws. Suddenly their path split into two directions. They hadn't remembered that fork before. Before Raj could decide, a voice whispered from the left, "This way," from the right, "No, here." They froze, paralyzed. Both voices sounded like the same woman they'd seen. Panicked, the group blindly chose the right path. For minutes they rushed forward, hearts pounding, until they stumbled into an open clearing. At the center stood a massive dead tree, its trunk split and hollow. Inside the hollow, dozens of small cloth dolls dangled by strings, swaying like bodies. Most were burnt, their faces blackened. Above the dolls, words had been carved into the bark, "Leave them here." Ali gasped. "What does it mean?" But Raj didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on something else. Fresh Polaroid photos pinned to the hollow wall, photos of them. Sitting by the fire earlier, sleeping in the tent, walking this very path. The last one was blank, except for smudges. Like a photo being developed right now. The escape that wasn't all four of them ran, tripping and clawing through thorny brush, ignoring the cuts on their arms and faces. The forest twisted around them like a maze. Every turn looked the same. Every direction led them deeper inside. Yet behind them the voices grew calmer, softer, as if confident their prey had nowhere else to run. Suddenly, they saw lights ahead, faint yellow orbs through the trees. Civilization. Relief surged through Raj's chest. They burst from the woods onto a dirt road where two farmers stood with lanterns. Raj begged, voice cracking, "Please help us. Someone's in the forest following us." The farmers exchanged stiff looks. Then, without a word, they turned their lanterns toward the trees. And there she was, the same woman, hair draping down, standing just at the tree line. Behind her, dozens of figures lined the woods, all motionless, all silent. Ali clutched Raj's arm, whispering, "They're not real." Raj turned back toward the farmers, but both men were gone. In their place, two lanterns floated mid-air, white flames flickering unnaturally, refusing to burn out. The woods swallowed the group again. The road was gone. No sign of escape. The next morning, another set of hikers stumbled across the campsite. A collapsed tent, food half-eaten, bags scattered. But no sign of Raj, Ali, or their two friends. Just 4 Polaroid pictures taped neatly to a nearby tree. The final photo was still developing, the image slowly sharpening into view. 4 terrified faces staring out into the lens, and behind them, hundreds of shadows all smiling. The abandoned campsite, arrival at the forgotten place. Sami and his cousin Farhan were seasoned hikers, the sort of young thrill-seekers who prided themselves on exploring trails nobody else bothered to step foot on. On one long weekend, they decided to venture further into the northern hills, where the forests were dense, the paths unmarked, and the nights absolutely silent. By late afternoon, they stumbled upon what seemed to be a perfect spot, an open clearing, soft earth and a fire pit made from stones. But what unsettled them was that the fire pit wasn't old. It looked used recently. Ash still grey, faint outlines of burnt sticks scattered around. Someone had camped here, maybe even within days. "No problem," Sami muttered, rolling his shoulders. "People leave sites behind all the time." They pitched their tent and began unpacking food. While rummaging for supplies, Farhan noticed something half buried near a tree. Brushing the soil off, he pulled out a child's shoe caked with dried mud. It was damp, soft leather, far too small for either of them. Creepy, but maybe some family camped here, Farhan tried to reason. Sami nodded, but neither liked the way the shoe looked, as if it had been torn from someone's foot. The evening settled into quiet. As the sun dipped below the pines, the true wilderness emerged. The sharp calls of night birds, cold air drifting, and utter blackness. But just as they lit their fire, Sami noticed something terrifying. At the clearing's far edge, barely visible in the fire's glow, was another tent, ripped, beaten down by the weather, yet clearly not abandoned long ago. He swore it wasn't there when they arrived. Disturbances in the dark. The mysterious tent gnawed at their nerves. Sami wanted to check it out immediately, but Farhan convinced him to wait until morning. The two huddled around their fire, trying to talk about anything else, but their voices faltered in the heavy silence pressing in from the forest. Around midnight, their fire began to sputter unnaturally, as if a strong wind blew through. Yet the trees around them were completely still. Sami tossed more wood into the fire, but the flames only quivered weakly, refusing to brighten. Then the sounds began. Slow crunches, footsteps, circling the clearing, too measured to be an animal. Farhan seized the flashlight and swept it around. Nothing. Only glinting branches and long, stretched-out shadows. The noise came again. This time a crack of wood, like someone stepping deliberately on a branch just beyond the tree line. "Who's there?" Sammy barked, his voice trembling. Silence, and then faintly from the direction of the ruined tent, soft crying. The kind of fragile, high-pitched whimper only a child makes. Sammy and Farhan froze, every drop of blood draining from their faces. It lasted less than a minute. Then silence reclaimed the woods. Farhan whispered, We have to see. What if it's a kid?" They rushed toward the torn tent, flashlights shaking. The crying stopped instantly. The inside of the tent was shredded, fabric damp with something dark that had long dried. Empty candy wrappers lay scattered across the dirt floor. The sight in the far corner made their stomachs turn, scratched lines carved into the earth, as if someone had dug fingernails dragging toward the flap. And then a voice right behind them whispered in the dark, "Stay here." Haunted ground. The cousins bolted back to their own tent, slamming the zipper shut as if fabric alone could guard them against whatever stalked outside. Both sat trembling, listening to the heavy silence pressing against their ears. Farhan's phone flickered with one bar of signal. In a frenzy, he tried dialing for help, but the call didn't go through. Instead, static filled the speaker. Amid the static, a distorted voice pushed through faintly, "Don't leave," before cutting off completely. The night stretched endlessly. Every so often, one of them swore they heard movements around the tent, faint scratching along the nylon like fingernails scraping lightly. Twice the zipper trembled, as though invisible fingers pinched it and tugged. Neither dared to unzip and look. Around 3 a.m., Sammy finally peeked outside through the mesh window. His breath froze in his throat. Across the clearing in front of the ruined tent stood a child. A boy, maybe 7 years old. He had no shoes, just dirty feet, and he watched their tent silently. The firelight caught the odd angle of his neck, crooked, hanging to one side. Sammy backed away from the window, face pale. "There's a kid," he whispered. Farhan turned to look, but when he reached the mesh, the boy was gone. Moments later came the dragging sound again, something being pulled across dirt, circling their tent. Neither spoke for the rest of the night, too paralyzed with fear to make a sound. Finally, after endless dark hours, the forest lightened into dawn. The noises stopped. Birds returned. For the first time, the cousins dared to step outside, and lying neatly at the entrance of their tent was a matching child's shoe. Discovery. Shaken, they decided the trip was over. They packed quickly, barely speaking, desperate to leave the cursed clearing. As they prepared to collapse the tent, Farhan noticed something carved into the bark of the nearest tree, a set of initials, then a date. Beneath the date were tally marks, dozens of them etched deep. Some lines fresh, others older. Almost like someone was keeping track of days. Someone was stuck here, Farhan muttered. Uneasy, they began the long hike back. But every path they took bent them back toward the same clearing. Twice, after walking nearly an hour in one direction, they emerged in the exact same spot, with the ruined tent swaying in the breeze. By the third attempt, they panicked. Sammy smashed branches in frustration, shouting into the empty trees. The only answer was a faint giggle that darted through the forest like wind. "I don't get it. We were going straight," Sammy cried. It was then they noticed movement near the ruined tent again, though now in daylight. Not a child this time, but a woman. Tall, with long black hair, back turned toward them. She stood completely still, as though carved of stone. They couldn't see her face. They didn't want to. The woman moved suddenly, her body twisting in an inhuman jerk to face them from across the clearing. But her face was blurred, impossible to focus on, like a smudge on reality itself. The air thickened, pressing in on them, and then the daylight dimmed unnaturally fast, as if the sun itself was being smothered. Whatever she wasn't letting them leave. The last fire as panic clawed through their veins. The cousins made one final plan: burn everything. Sammy reasoned that maybe the site itself was cursed. If they destroyed it, maybe they could break free. They doused the ruined tent in fuel and lit their final match. Flames leapt high, consuming torn fabric, scorching wood, sending black smoke spiraling into the sky. For a moment, relief washed over them, but it didn't last. From the flames, shapes emerged, faces forming in the smoke. Dozens of pale children's faces, mouths open in silent screams. The air filled with the sound of wailing, though no lips moved. The cousins staggered back, clutching their ears. Then the boy appeared again, feet bare, shoe missing. He stepped out from behind their tent, his head still leaning grotesquely to one side. "You burned it," he whispered, lips finally moving. Sami and Farhan bolted blindly into the woods, running until their lungs tore for air. Yet somehow every direction led them back. As though the forest itself folded them in, the fire died suddenly. When they turned, the clearing was whole again. The ruined tent stood still untouched, still waiting. No smoke, no ash. The campsite looked as though they had never tried to burn it, as if the night had reset itself. No one ever saw them after that trip. Months later, forest rangers found a tent and belongings in the same clearing. Inside, they discovered 2 pairs of boots neatly placed at the entrance, but no footprints leading away. And by the ruined tent, resting on the dirt, lay 2 more tally marks freshly carved into the tree bark. The canyon that breathes into the Red Canyon. Faizan and his 2 close friends, Saad and Hamza, wanted something different than the usual forest camping trips. Inspired by travel blogs, they set out for a vast canyon in Balochistan, a place locals avoided at night but described with awe, the Red Canyon. Its cliffs were jagged, painted with rust-red stone, and winds there made strange noises that echoed like whispers. After a 6-hour drive and a grueling trek, they reached a flat ridge perfect for their camp. From above they could see the canyon floor stretching endlessly, its cracks winding into black veins that seemed to vanish into the earth itself. They set up their tent and lit a campfire as darkness cloaked the dry landscape. The silence was unlike any they'd known. Not a bird, not an insect, just the low moan of wind weaving through narrow rock walls. As they ate their dinner, Saad pointed out something eerie. "Why does the canyon sound like it's breathing?" They stopped chewing. Indeed, the wind carried pulses, as if air was being sucked in and exhaled regularly. Every minute or so, the canyon made a soft guttural sigh. Hamza laughed nervously. "It's just wind." But after a while, the rhythm seemed too intentional, too alive. That night, long after Saad and Hamza slept, Faizan lay awake, staring into the canyon below. Through moonlight, he swore he saw the rocks shift slightly, opening and closing like lips. And suddenly, from deep within, the canyon exhaled again, and this time, he heard a faint groan. Not the wind, a man's groan. The figures at dusk. The next morning, Faizan tried convincing his friends that something was wrong with the canyon. He told them about the groan, the way the rocks appeared to move, but they dismissed it, chalked it up to midnight imagination and hunger. Reluctantly, he let it go, but by evening unease flooded back. When Hamza returned from scouting water further down a dry stream bed, his face was stark white. I saw people," Sami frowned. "There's no one here for miles, man," but Hamza insisted. He described tall figures standing along the canyon wall, perfectly still, their bodies thin, limbs elongated, as if stretched like shadows into human form. They weren't moving, weren't talking, just watching. To prove it, they all hiked back with Hamza's lead. And there they were. Even in daylight, they saw them. 6 figures, black silhouettes against the rust-red cliffs, standing completely frozen. Too far for details, but close enough to see those unnatural proportions. Then the wind howled through the canyon. As the sound swirled around, the figures tilted their heads all at once, toward the 3 friends. The group fled back to the tent in silence, hearts hammering. That night, they dared not light a fire. They sat in total darkness listening. At midnight, the canyon's breathing grew louder, harsher, as if the thing beneath was waking. And around their tent, footsteps crunched slowly, steady as a march. When Faizan peeked, his stomach turned cold. The black figures now stood in a circle at the edge of their campsite, voices beneath the earth. The figures never moved closer, at least not visibly. But they stood there until dawn, vanishing only once the sun spilled over the jagged ridges. All three were terrified, but too proud to admit defeat. They tried one last time to rationalize it, tricks of shadow, hallucinations, stress. By mid-afternoon, with no signal and dwindling supplies, Hamza suggested they leave immediately, but the canyon wasn't finished with them. As they packed, Saad knelt near a crack in the canyon floor, tying his boot. He suddenly recoiled, eyes wide, face pale. "Guys, listen." They all leaned down. From beneath the earth came muffled voices, a chorus. Men, women, children, speaking in overlapping whispers none of them understood. The sound grew rhythmical, like chanting, rising and falling along with the canyon's breathing. They backed away quickly, adrenaline surging. By dusk, as they hiked desperately toward their car, the canyon's cries seemed to follow. Each gust of wind carried the sound of words, sharper now. One voice rang clearer than the rest. "Leave one behind." Hamza stumbled, panic shooting through him. Did you hear that?" The canyon groaned again, this time a deep guttural roar that vibrated through their bones. Rocks tumbled from above. They broke into a sprint, sand kicking beneath their boots, but the path behind them was closing. Cracks twisted, splitting anew, chunks of stone collapsing as though the canyon swallowed itself whole. By the time they returned to camp, their gear scattered. They had run in circles. The sacrifice. The three argued violently, all nerves shredded. Saad shouted at Hamza, blaming him for leading them astray. Hamza fired back that Faizan's paranoia had cursed them. Suddenly their fight silenced when they realized the canyon wasn't groaning anymore, it was breathing, faster, louder, almost eager. Then came the whisper again, this time from all directions, echoing from cliff walls, from cracks from the dry ground beneath their feet. "Leave one, leave one, leave one." The black silhouettes reappeared at the far edge of camp, closer than before, their heads twitching in erratic jolts. The three pressed back against their tent, clutching whatever they could as weapons. Saad pointed wildly at the shapes. "They want one of us. Someone has to, someone, shut up!" Faizan roared, voice raw. But then they noticed Hamza, standing very still, pale, almost resigned. "It's me, isn't it?" he whispered. "They're not going to stop." Before either could stop him, Hamza stepped forward toward the shifting silhouettes. The canyon exhaled a roar so powerful it knocked both Faizan and Saad to their knees. The ground quaked. Through the dust and choking heat they watched in horror as Hamza vanished. One moment he walked toward the figures, the next, the ground swallowed him whole. No scream, no blood, just gone. And suddenly silence. The canyon stopped breathing. The canyon sleeps. The next morning, Faizan and Saad staggered out of the campsite. The canyon air was still, no whispers, no footsteps, just the cruel heat of day. They managed to climb the ridge and reach their car, driving in shaken silence the entire way home. Neither man spoke of what they'd seen, not to family, not to each other. Hamza's disappearance was reported, but officials claimed the desert terrain was unforgiving. "Tragic accident," they said. 2 years passed. Both Faizan and Saad tried to rebuild their lives, though haunted by nightmares. Each night they heard the canyon sigh. Each morning they woke drenched in sweat, hearing Hamza's voice faintly whisper, "My turn." Then one evening, Faizan received a package at his doorstep. No return address. Inside was a Polaroid. The photo showed the Red Canyon at dusk. At the canyon's heart, barely visible, stood Hamza. His neck lengthened unnaturally, limbs warped, eyes hollow. Behind him, countless black silhouettes loomed, stretching for miles. On the back of the photo, a message scrawled in ash. The canyon never sleeps. One day it will breathe for you. Faizan didn't show it to Saad. Deep down he knew what it meant. The canyon hadn't been fed enough. It had only been patient, and sooner or later it would call them back. The lake that remembers. The midnight swim. Sarah, her brother Bilal, and 2 friends ventured into the mountains of Kagan, lured by stories of a remote, crystal-clear lake hidden far from tourist paths. Locals warned them about Shamkajil, the evening lake. They said no one should stay there after sunset, that the water was cursed. But to city kids craving adventure, old folk tales only added charm. After a long trek, they gasped when they saw it, a flawless mirror of water cupped inside jagged cliffs. It reflected the sky so perfectly they felt upside down, as though stepping into another world. Camp went up by the shoreline, laughter echoing across still waters. At nightfall, Bilal dared his friends, "Let's swim. Who cares about ghost stories?" They stripped to shorts and waded in. The water was icy, their splashes loud, but soon the joy turned uneasy. Sarah froze mid-swim. "Wait, where are the ripples?" The others stopped. She was right. Though they had been splashing moments ago, the surface stilled instantly, unnaturally flat, as if it erased movement, and then came bubbles from the center of the lake. Slow, steady bubbles rose, as though something enormous stirred far below. The ripples spread outward, widening toward them, though none of them moved. Bilal whispered shakily, We should get out." But Sarah was staring into the water. A pale face had risen beneath her reflection. It was her own face, dead, with hollow eyes and a swollen, drowning grin. The first vanishing. They scrambled to shore, shivering not just from cold, but from raw terror. Their fire crackled as they huddled, trembling, ears ringing from adrenaline. No one dared look back at the water. Minutes stretched. Finally, their friend Hassan murmured, "Maybe it was a trick." We were tired, cold, but before he could finish, the sound came, splashes. They spun toward the lake. The surface rippled again, this time without any of them touching it. Bubbles swelled at the center. The pale reflection of faces appeared, 4 of them identical to theirs but twisted, drowned. Sarah screamed. Hassan snapped, "We're leaving now, forget tonight." They shoved gear into bags frantically. But as they packed, Hassan suddenly froze. His face slackened. "Wait," he whispered. He dropped his bag and without a word began walking back to the shoreline. "Haz, what are you doing?" Bilal shouted, grabbing his arm. Hassan didn't respond. His lips moved slightly, muttering words the others couldn't hear. He reached the water barefoot, kneeling as if entranced. Sarah and Bilal sprinted after him, but before they touched his shoulder, Hassan leaned forward and slid into the lake with no splash, as though the water swallowed him whole. The lake stilled instantly again, mirror flat, no bubbles, no ripples, just Hassan's face smiling faintly from beneath the surface. The patrol at the shore panic gripped the remaining 3. Sarah collapsed sobbing, while Bilal shook uncontrollably. Their third friend, Mariam, tried to steady them, but her own voice quivered. We just watched him drown without drowning." They kept the fire blazing, praying daylight would bring safety. But as the night deepened, so did their horror. The silence of the mountains pressed down heavy. And then Sarah noticed footprints, wet ones imprinted along the shoreline. She stared, her stomach dropping. The footprints weren't theirs. They circled their tent, fresh, glistening, as though someone had just risen, dripping wet, and walked deliberately around their camp several times. Bilal hissed, "Do you see? Hassan, could he actually—" But Sarah shook her head violently. The prints were too large for Hassan, almost double his size. That night no one slept. Every few minutes a faint dripping sound echoed from different spots, sometimes behind the tent, sometimes to the left of the fire, sometimes disturbingly close. Around 3 a.m., Mariam choked out a scream. She pointed toward the lake. A tall figure stood knee-deep in water, moonlight gleaming on its soaked skin. Its back was toward them, head tilted at an impossible angle. Slowly it turned, revealing Hassan's face stretched across a too-long frame, smiling wider than humanly possible. Everyone staggered back toward the forest edge, but Sarah froze in terror, because her drowned reflection was still in the water, smiling identically. The bargain by dawn. Exhausted and broken, they tried again to escape. Bags on backs, boots heavy with dirt, they forced themselves away from the lake through thick shrub. But the trail twisted unnaturally, winding them back. After 2 hours of walking, they broke out of the trees onto the same cursed shoreline. Their fire pit still smoldered. The lake sat dead calm, reflecting their strained faces. Something was keeping them there. Mariam snapped, flinging rocks into the water. "What do you want from us?" she screamed. Her answer came instantly. The reflections in the water didn't mimic them anymore. Instead, 3 drowned strangers' faces stared upward, swollen, eyeless, and then Hassan's voice floated softly across the lake. "One more." Bilal collapsed, rocking back and forth. He understood. Hassan wasn't alive. The lake had taken him, twisted him, and now it demanded another. Sarah whispered, horrified, It wants a trade." When Mariam spat into the water in defiance, the reaction was immediate. The world fell silent. No breath of wind, no bird. Then, out of nowhere, something invisible slammed into her. She screamed as unseen hands yanked her toward the lake, soil tearing beneath her fingernails as she clawed the ground. Sarah and Bilal tried pulling her, but the grip was too strong. Her body slid smoothly over the rocks into the water. No splash. The lake reset, utterly calm, and now only 2 remained. The last reflection. Sarah and Bilal sat frozen by daylight, unable to decide whether to run or give up. Their minds fractured under the weight of what they had seen. In the silence, Sarah whispered, "It'll never let us go." Bilal shook his head stubbornly. "We'll outlast it. Once we leave, we'll tell people. Burn this place down." But even as he spoke, she saw it. The water rippling faintly, small concentric circles, reflections forming slowly. This time there were only 2 faces staring back. One was Sarah, drowned and smiling. The other was Bilal, bloated and hollow-eyed. He blinked rapidly, backing away. No, that's not me." But his reflection didn't mimic his movements. Instead, it raised a hand, beckoning downward into the depths. Then Sarah gasped. There was a third reflection appearing faintly, blurred, someone yet to be chosen. Her. She understood all at once. The lake could only be full when everyone's reflection lived beneath. That was why it wouldn't let them leave. She bolted toward the woods, her screams echoing up cliffs. Behind her, she heard Bilal's voice cut off like water gurgling. She didn't turn back. She never escaped the forest roads. Rangers later found her body wandering alone 3 days later, clothes soaked though no rain had fallen, whispering the same phrase over and over. "The lake remembers. The lake remembers. The lake remembers." And in their photos of the site, when rangers looked closer at the water faint beneath the surface, 4 faces stared back, still smiling.